It was 7:42 in the morning when a jogger on the banks of Bear Creek dialed 911. He told dispatchers he'd seen clothes, too many, tangled among branches, half buried in mud. What police found instead was a body they had no right to expect. She had been walking home that night. Walking with someone she trusted. And when she vanished, everything that followed would rip apart a quiet Stockton neighborhood, exposing secrets that were supposed to stay buried. He claimed to be just a friend. He claimed he did nothing wrong. But the phone records, video footage, and deleted files would speak louder than his words. In this video, you will hear how investigators pieced together fragments, texts, GPS logs, witness reports, to reveal how a night of laughter ended in brutal betrayal. This is the story of the last walk home in Stockton. Welcome back to Unseen Crime, where we bring you carefully reconstructed and fact-based examinations of the events that forever change ordinary lives. Our story tonight takes us to Stockton, California, a city that has seen its share of struggle and recovery. A place of small parks, family-run stores, and long, quiet streets that hum with the sound of sprinklers after dark. For most people here, life moves at an easy pace. Friends grow up together, neighbors share cookouts, and trust still means something. Kayla Burns was one of those people. 20 years old, an aspiring nurse who had just finished her first year of college. She'd come home to Stockton for the summer, planning to save money, spend time with family, and maybe volunteer at the community clinic where she'd once been treated as a kid. Those who knew her talk about her energy, always moving, always laughing, always helping. She was the kind of friend who remembered birthdays, who brought coffee for coworkers, who texted to make sure you got home safe. Her family says she was looking forward to the fall semester, to new classes and a new apartment she'd just signed for with two of her best friends. On social media, she posted photos of sunset drives through the Delta and weekend trips to the coast. Nothing unusual, nothing that hinted at danger. But Stockton, like any city, has its shadows. The spaces under bridges, the empty lots along the creek, the places most people avoid once the sun sets. And on a warm Thursday night in June, Kayla decided to walk home with someone she'd trusted since childhood. Someone she believed would make sure she got back safely. She never did. Within hours, that trust would collapse, and what began as a simple walk through familiar streets would end with a search that drew in an entire community. Tonight, we retrace those final steps, the investigation that followed, and the evidence that finally exposed what really happened to Kayla Burns, the young woman whose last walk home changed Stockton forever. It was a Thursday, June 8th. Temperatures in Stockton had cooled after a long humid day, the kind that left the air heavy and slow. Downtown was alive that night. Local venues were packed. Music spilled onto the sidewalks. Among the crowds was Kayla Burns, 20 years old, smiling, her blonde hair pulled into a loose ponytail. Her phone camera captured short clips, laughter, music, faces illuminated by stage lights. Standing beside her in almost every frame was Darren Shaw, 22. He wasn't new in her life. He'd known her since middle school. Their families lived 2 blocks apart. On social media, Kayla posted one last story, a short, 10-second video of her and Darren cheering, the caption reading, "Best night in forever." The concert ended a few minutes before midnight. People began spilling out onto the sidewalks, waving down rides, saying their goodbyes. According to multiple witnesses, Kayla and Darren stayed behind, lingering for a while near the parking lot. Security footage from a nearby gas station at 11:48 p.m. captured them walking together. Kayla in a denim jacket, Darren in a dark hoodie. It would be the last confirmed sighting of her alive. In a later interview, one of their friends recalled that Darren seemed unusually quiet that night. He wasn't drunk, not high, just withdrawn. Kayla didn't seem to notice. She was still laughing, texting her sister, making plans for brunch the next morning. Investigators would later find that those texts stopped abruptly at 12:07 a.m. Her phone remained active for another 40 minutes, but there were no more messages, no more posts, no more movement. But Kayla never made it home, and the messages she sent after that would raise chilling questions. The next morning, Kayla's sister, Maya, noticed the first sign something was wrong. Kayla's bed was untouched. Her shoes, the same ones from the night before, were gone. Her phone went straight to voicemail. At first, the family assumed she had stayed over with a friend, but by noon, worry turned to panic. At 1:36 p.m., Maya walked into the Stockton Police Department to file a missing person report. Officers began canvassing her last known locations, the concert venue, nearby streets, and the route she would have taken home. Darren was the first person they contacted. He picked up on the first ring. Calm. Cooperative. He told them exactly what he told Kayla's family. I dropped her off near her street, around midnight. She said she'd text me when she got in. But when detectives checked neighborhood surveillance, they found no footage of Darren's car on Kayla's street that night. No headlights. No motion detected. Nothing. His story changed. Once, then again. First, he said he left her at a corner near a convenience store. Then, later, that she wanted to walk the rest of the way home alone. One officer described Darren as calm to the point of detachment. He didn't ask many questions. He didn't volunteer to join the search. By that evening, Stockton police had launched a full search operation. Helicopters scanned the waterways. Volunteers gathered in community centers. The local news carried Kayla's photo, a smiling young woman in a denim jacket, frozen in time. A 911 call replayed from that day captured the fear of those early hours. My sister didn't come home. She's always home. Please, she's not like this. If Darren had nothing to hide, why did his story change 3 times? At 7:42 a.m., 48 hours after she was last seen, a jogger along Bear Creek noticed something unusual. A tangle of fabric and branches in the shallow water, half hidden by reeds. When he got closer, he realized it wasn't clothing. It was a body. Police sealed off the area within minutes. Forensic teams arrived. Kayla's identification was found in her jacket pocket. Her phone, water-damaged but recoverable, was nearby, wedged in the mud. The autopsy confirmed what investigators already feared: death by strangulation. Bruising patterns suggested a struggle, defensive wounds on her forearms, scratches along her hands. Detectives also found a single dark fiber clutched in her right palm. Soil impressions around the scene revealed partial shoe prints, men's size 10, consistent with Darren's. Later that day, police requested Darren's phone. He handed it over willingly. He looked nervous but kept repeating, "I told you everything." Digital forensic analysts began pulling data from the device, and that's when the timeline began to shift. Between 12:08 a.m. and 12:49 a.m., Darren's GPS placed him not near Kayla Street, but less than half a mile from Bear Creek. His step counter registered sudden movement, followed by stillness for over an hour. The messages Kayla sent that night, the last ones, had been to him. Simple, casual, almost home. Thanks again. See you tomorrow. But there was one unsent message found in her drafts folder, time-stamped 12:11 a.m. It read, "Can you not act weird right now?" The chilling realization came slowly, piece by piece, as evidence stacked higher. But the most crucial clue wasn't found at the creek, it was hidden inside Darren's phone. And when investigators opened it, what they found would turn this missing persons case into a murder investigation that Stockton would never forget. The news of Kayla Burns' death hit Stockton like a thunderclap. Within hours, every local outlet carried the same photo, a young woman's smiling face against a bright blue sky. On social media, hashtags appeared before the facts had even settled. Hashtag Justice for Kayla. Hashtag Find the Truth. The community wanted answers, but the noise made the search for truth harder. Rumors began to grow like weeds. Some said a stranger had been spotted near Bear Creek the night of the murder, a tall man in a red jacket. Others claimed there had been a string of similar assaults in nearby towns. None of it held up under scrutiny. Detectives combed through every call, every tip. One woman insisted she'd seen Kayla in a blue car hours after she was supposed to be dead. Another said she heard screams behind a warehouse near the creek, though the location didn't match the GPS data. Detectives learned quickly that they weren't just working against a murderer, They were battling misinformation, a flood of half-truths, guesswork, and online hysteria that sent them chasing shadows while real evidence sat waiting. In one report, a detective wrote, "The hardest part isn't finding clues. It's finding the truth buried under everyone's version of it." Meanwhile, Darren's behavior began to draw quiet attention. Friends said he stopped posting online, stopped showing up to work. He ignored calls from Kayla's family, telling one mutual friend that he just couldn't deal with all the questions. Yet, when police visited his home to follow up, he was polite, almost too polite. He repeated the same story, word for word, as if rehearsed. At the same time, another officer revisiting the scene at Bear Creek noticed something strange. About 15 feet from where Kayla's body was found, there was a shallow indentation in the mud, like a partial footprint, recently disturbed by water. The print matched Darren's shoe size. The investigators knew they were close, but they still lacked a single, undeniable connection. At this point, investigators weren't just fighting a killer, they were fighting misinformation. When the digital forensics team finished their initial analysis of Kayla's phone, one detail stood out immediately. Her phone had stayed active for 45 minutes after Darren said goodbye. The data showed movement, steps being counted, a route that led toward the creek. After that, a sudden stop. Then nothing. Investigators expanded the search. They subpoenaed cell tower pings, location logs, and metadata from Darren's phone. The results were damning. Between 12:10 and 12:49 a.m., his phone and smartwatch were both within 100 meters of Bear Creek. His heart rate, logged automatically, spiked twice, once around the time Kayla's phone stopped moving. A forensic specialist noted, "The data shows intense movement, then complete stillness. It mirrors a struggle." But it was what came next that truly unraveled the case. Hidden in a cache of deleted files was a series of photographs, fragments, corrupted images. Analysts spent hours restoring them. What they found were low-light selfies, taken earlier that night. Darren and Kayla, walking, smiling. Then, in one image, her expression changes, blurred, eyes uncertain, mouth slightly open. The timestamp, 12:07 a.m. In another recovered file, investigators found a video, deleted only minutes after Kayla's death. It was 10 seconds long, silent, shaky, showing nothing but the reflection of trees and water under faint streetlight. But in the background, a voice could be heard, faintly. "Please, Darren, stop." The audio was enough to reclassify the case from suspicious death to homicide. Detectives now had digital proof that Darren was at the creek that night, proof that Kayla was alive moments before the struggle, and that he had tried to erase it. And then, police uncovered something that changed everything. A video, deleted only minutes after Kayla's death. Darren Shaw was brought in again for questioning. This time, it wasn't informal. The detective's tone had changed. Cameras recorded every word, every flicker of movement. He began calmly, the same way he always did, arms folded, voice steady. "I told you everything that happened. I dropped her off. That's it." The lead detective laid a folder on the table. Inside, screenshots from Darren's smartwatch and photos from Kayla's phone. "If you dropped her off," the detective asked, "why does your heart rate spike 40 minutes later by the creek?" Darren blinked, looked down, exhaled. He said he'd gone for a walk to clear his head. Then came the second blow, the restored video. They didn't play it at first, they simply told him they had it. His reaction said enough. His eyes widened, his jaw tightened, and his posture changed. A body language expert who reviewed the footage later said, that was the moment he realized his story was collapsing. Detectives pressed harder. His narrative began to crumble. He contradicted himself, first claiming he left her alive, then saying she fell near the water, then saying he panicked. Finally, when they confronted him with the audio of Kayla's voice, her pleading, he went silent for nearly 30 seconds. Then he muttered, "It wasn't supposed to happen like that." The room stayed quiet. The detectives exchanged glances. They knew they had what they needed. When officers confronted him with one final piece of evidence, his mask completely slipped. Darren Shaw was arrested that evening and charged with the murder of Kayla Burns. But the story wasn't over. What came next, the trial, the testimony, and the truth about that final walk home, would test the limits of justice in Stockton, California. It was a quiet Saturday morning in downtown Stockton when officers moved in. Darren Shaw sat outside a small cafe on Channel Street, sipping coffee with two friends, laughing at something on his phone. The world around him looked ordinary. Sunlight, the hum of passing cars, the smell of roasted beans. But plainclothes detectives had been watching for hours. When the signal came through the radio, they moved fast. Two officers approached from behind, another from the front. Darren barely looked up before he was surrounded. "Darren Shaw, you're under arrest for the murder of Kayla Burns." His friends froze, disbelief painted across their faces. Someone started recording with their phone as the officers handcuffed him. "He didn't seem capable of that," one friend told reporters later. "He was quiet, polite. The kind of guy who'd hold the door open for you." As Darren was led to the patrol car, his eyes scanned the crowd that had started to gather. Cameras flashed. People whispered. For the first time, the easy confidence he carried was gone, replaced by something that looked like fear. By noon, the footage was everywhere. The same people who once speculated online about a mystery killer now filled comment sections with anger, betrayal, and disbelief. The man everyone trusted was now the face of the city's darkest story. The trial began 8 months later at the San Joaquin County Superior Court. By dawn, news vans lined the street outside. Reporters, family members, and curious locals filled every seat. The prosecution started with a single image, Kayla's photo projected on the courtroom screen. Smiling, bright, alive. Then, slowly, they built the story around her final night. Prosecutor Laura Mejia stood before the jury. She trusted him. She believed she was safe. But that trust cost her everything. Digital forensics told a story that Darren's words could not erase. His smartwatch placed him near Bear Creek between 11:53 p.m. and 12:42 a.m. Kayla's phone stopped transmitting at 12:17 a.m. And the deleted 14-second video, partially recovered from a cloud backup, showed Kayla's voice pleading, faint and terrified. The courtroom was still. Even the sound of the ceiling fan seemed too loud. Darren's defense attorney, Mark Kellerman, argued it was an accident. That Kayla slipped near the creek during an argument, and that panic made Darren cover up the truth. He painted Darren as a young man overwhelmed by fear, not malice. But the evidence didn't support fear, it showed preparation. The prosecution revealed that Darren had searched online for "how long it takes to drown" just 2 nights before the murder. Witnesses came forward. Kayla's best friend, Lila Thompson, testified that Kayla had expressed unease about Darren's protective streak. Another mutual friend said Darren had shown up uninvited to parties, often keeping an eye on Kayla's every move. When the prosecution rested, the courtroom felt drained, the weight of weeks of testimony pressing on everyone. The jury deliberated for 9 hours. At 6:42 p.m., they returned. "We, the jury, find the defendant, Darren Shaw, guilty of first-degree murder." Gasps filled the room. Kayla's mother clutched her husband's arm, eyes shut, tears falling freely. Darren sat motionless, his gaze fixed on the floor. When asked if he had any final words before sentencing, Darren simply said, "I didn't mean to. I really didn't." The judge's voice was steady, almost gentle. "Intent is not erased by regret. You are sentenced to life imprisonment without the possibility of parole." The gavel fell, a sound both final and hollow. But what happened in that courtroom wasn't just justice, it was closure for an entire community. The weeks following the trial felt different in Stockton. The town that had once lived under a shadow began to heal, piece by piece. Candlelight vigils filled Victory Park. Hundreds gathered, holding photos, whispering prayers. Some wore blue, Kayla's favorite color. Others brought flowers, placing them along the railings near Bear Creek Bridge, where a small plaque now read, "In memory of Kayla Burns, forever in our hearts." Local artists painted a mural downtown, Kayla's smiling face surrounded by magnolias. The mural became a symbol, not of tragedy, but of resilience. The Burns family established the Kayla Burns Memorial Scholarship, providing grants for young women pursuing nursing and community health programs. Applications flooded in from across California. News outlets later reported that Stockton saw a surge in community safety initiatives. Self-defense classes, neighborhood night patrols, and awareness workshops became common. The tragedy that once tore the community apart was now reshaping it. Kayla's sister, Maya, spoke at the first memorial event. "We lost Kayla because she trusted someone who didn't deserve her trust. But we'll honor her by helping others, by keeping her light alive in the work she wanted to do." As the camera pans across candles flickering against the night sky, the narrator closes with a soft, reflective tone. In the end, justice was served, but the scars remain. Kayla Burns' story is a reminder that danger doesn't always come from the shadows. Sometimes, it comes from those standing right beside us. Thank you for watching Unseen Crime. If you found Kayla's story meaningful, share it, not for the algorithm, but for awareness. And tell me in the comments, what does justice look like when trust is broken? In the end, what happened to Kayla Burns was more than a crime, it was a breaking of trust. A friendship that should have ended with a good night, ended with a tragedy that silenced a life too bright to fade. For weeks, Stockton stood still, a city searching for answers, struggling to understand how something so cruel could come from someone so familiar. Parents held their children tighter. Friends checked in more often. And everyone who knew Kayla carried the same quiet question, why her? But as the months passed, something began to change. From the pain came a new kind of strength. Neighbors who had never spoken started watching out for each other. Classmates turned their grief into action, raising funds, starting conversations, keeping her memory alive. And in that unity, Stockton began to heal. Kayla's story isn't just about the night she was taken. It's about who she was, the laughter that filled her family's home, the kindness that made strangers feel seen, the dreams she carried for the future. Those things didn't end at Bear Creek. They still live on, in her family, her friends, and in every person who hears her story and chooses to care. Sometimes, the hardest stories to tell are the ones that remind us how fragile trust can be. But they also remind us of something greater, that love, once given, leaves a mark no tragedy can erase. Kayla Burns was 20 years old. She wanted to help people. She wanted to live. And though her story ends here, her voice does not. For every person who's ever trusted the wrong soul, and for every light that was taken too soon, this story is for you.